Hello, and welcome back to the Live Out Loud podcast. I am your host, Kim Kirkfleet, and I am so glad that you are here with me in this conversation, our third conversation on intentional families. In our first episode, we covered the question, where do I start? And I talked about where I start with my parenting journey, and that was a really fun conversation. And then our second one, we talked about some lies that we parent out of, right? And that was also a really good conversation. So today's episode, we will take right out from our Intentional Families workbook, which, if you haven't heard, is a great resource. It is one that came out of my love for families. And I wrote down things that I believe God is passionate about in our family lives. And so if you're looking for a good resource, that you can start with your family this fall, and as you kick off your school year, this is an amazing resource to have and to go through together with your family, or even just with you and your spouse. So if you're looking for something to do this fall, grab your resource. It is over on ellieandtheboys.co. You can download it today and have it and start it with your family. Today, we're going to talk about Chapter 1, A Strong Foundation. And I'm not going to talk about the whole thing because you can read through it there and work through it with your family. But we are going to start talking about a strong foundation today. So grab your coffee, mama, get your hot tea, your hot cocoa, whatever it is you are choosing to drink right now, or iced tea and iced coffee. Grab that and join me today as we just discuss parenting and family life together. I am so glad you are here. All right, now that we are settled in together, or maybe I'm walking around with you doing house chores, doing the dishes, laundry, whatever it is we are doing together, I'm glad to spend an afternoon with you. And while I have you, I'm going to ask a little question. If you sat your child down and asked them, why do we do the things we do? Would they be able to answer? And what would they say? And one more question for you. Who has more authority, you or God? Who carries more weight in their requests and demands, you or God? No, it is not a trick question. It is just one that you can keep in mind as we talk about our conversation today. And now that you've thought about both of them, let's go back to question number 1. If you asked your child why you do the things that you do as a family, would they be able to answer, and what would they say? Think about some of your values. For example, why are you respectful to people? Why do you or do you not take off your hat to pray? Why do you close your eyes when you pray? Why do you fold your hands or kneel? Why do you show up on time to different things? Why is it okay to be late? Why do we allow certain music, and why do we not allow other types of music? Think through your family values, and before you go asking your kids these questions, let's sit with it for a minute. Can we, as a parent, answer why we do the things that we do? Actually, first, before we keep going with this conversation in this direction, I have one more question. Have you stopped long enough to think through the values that your family holds and why they have a space in your family culture? And if you haven't, I would encourage you to stop and do that now. There's no greater time like the present, right? We've heard the saying, there's no better time than today. And if you haven't taken a look at your family values, I would encourage you to think through everything that your family holds as a value, everything that your family deems important. And when you think through them, think about why you hold them as a value. What space do they take up? How do they impact your life? Where do they come from? And all of these things are talked about in the Intentional Families workbook, so you can work through it there, but really good questions to get started. But today's conversation, we are assuming that the family values we practice have a sacred space within our family. So that's the light in which we will be talking about just the next few minutes over, right? So again, circling back to our question, can we as parents answer the reason why we hold certain values within our family? Okay, if you've been with us for any amount of time, you know that I love storytelling, and I usually have a podcast with a story. So here's the story for today. Years ago, I don't even know which child it was. The picture is so vivid except for who it was, but Together, this child and I were dealing with some heart issues. And in our discussion, I broke out my Bible and I looked up verses that spoke to this specific issue. And you know, in life, whenever you have moments that completely switch the direction in which you're going in, or they enlighten the path before you, this was that moment. The interaction, the response from reading those scriptures and bringing light to the heart issue with scripture was so beautiful that I realized, well, a couple things. One, that I had been parenting kind of missing out on the big picture. And two, that I was not tapping into all the resources I had. And this is where I was missing out on the big picture. I was taking our values and not giving them weight from the heart of God. I was just saying, we do this as a family because this is a preference. And maybe I wasn't saying that with my words, but my actions were saying just that. We do this because it is a preference. And when someone has a preference, we can quickly, our brains just classify it as well, I may not have to do this, or I can do it if I want. And this is where tapping into all of the resources I had available, which I was not using, comes in. I had the Word of God. I knew that our values were, this or that, because it comes from the heart of God, but I was not saying that to my children, and I was just expecting them to do because I said, but not because God commanded. Now, let me set the scene. When I started parenting, my kids were very young, just like all of you, or most of us, right? Our kids come to us as a baby, and we teach them right from wrong. We teach them the difference between safe things and dangerous things, and the difference between the word yes and the word no. And these things don't really require a big explanation other than common sense. We don't grab mommy's coffee off the table because it is hot. It will burn you. A simple explanation. And as my kids got older, I continued parenting in this way, giving simple explanations for heart issues that needed a little bit more weight behind them. And this caused for me to have to repeat myself over and over and over again. Why? Because they didn't understand the importance of what I was trying to teach them. The way my child responded whenever I broke out my Bible, I saw the response from their entire body shifted. I knew my values needed more than because I said so. Oh, those dreaded words, right? Because I said so. Sure, those words carry weight, but let me go back to our second question I asked. Who carries more weight, you or God? For our kids to be able to answer the first question we asked, can they answer why we do the things we do? It requires action on our part as parents. It requires for us to give them a why. And I know, we can roll our eyes at this thought of having to give our children a why. Shouldn't my word be enough? Shouldn't, because I asked them to do this, be enough? Actually, it's only enough if you want them to do it half-hearted or for them not to know the importance of why they are doing something. Don't we all like to know why we do something? It doesn't matter if it's the smallest of tasks or the biggest of jobs. We like to know the purpose behind what we are doing. And our kids are the same way. And now, I'm not saying that every moment is a great time for you to stop and explain the why. There are times that it is imperative for your children to stop what they are doing and not question for their own safety. But most of the times, in our homes or in our daily rhythms, whenever they ask, Mom, why? Why did you say this? Or why do we do this? It is okay to give them an answer other than because I said so. First of all, as parents, we should be able to give an answer as to why we do certain things, right? Whenever our kids ask, why did we pause the movie and not continue watching it? Or why did you say we were going to do one thing and then did another? So if we're thinking about giving our children an answer as to why things matter, I think the question for us as parents becomes this: how do we give them a why without compromising our own authority, right? I think often we think that if people are allowed to ask why, then that makes us, or whoever's in charge, look weak. But that is not the case when we point the why back to God. Again, who has more authority, me or God? And if God has more authority than I do, then why? Why would I not point my kids the why question back to God? And this is where the action part comes in for us as parents. First of all, our children are precious, precious children. Don't always know how to ask something in the most respectful way. And that is just a normal thing about humans. We have to be taught good things. And this is a good thing to teach them how and when to ask about our values. Here's a common occurrence in our home. Say we are out and about in town and I ask someone to do something, or I don't know, I make a statement and my kids will willingly do whatever I ask of them. And then later on, when we get home, maybe I'm tucking the kids in bed or saying goodnight or I'm cooking dinner, one of the kids that had a question will approach me and ask me why I did the things I did or why I took one decision over another. This is a very valid question. Questions are good. And I will insert this from last week. We cannot take it personal. Parents, we cannot take these questions personal. Our kids can ask us questions. And if we don't have an answer, we can tell them, I don't know. I will get back to you. And if we have an answer, we can give it without attacking them for asking us, for questioning us. So what does this look like? It looks like giving questions value based in Scripture, value based in the heart of God. Take the question, why do we not tell lies? Well, simple. Society doesn't accept it. We don't tell lies, right? Or we can give them an answer straight from the heart of God. In Proverbs, God hates the lying tongue. Imagine that word, to hate something, to repel it with everything you are. You cannot even stand to be around it. God hates a lying tongue. We could give them an answer of wanting to please society and wanting to be accepted socially. Or we can tell them that the King of Kings, the Creator of the universe, the Father who loves them deeply, wants them not to lie because He Himself hates it, because He is holy, because He cannot be around that. And He wants to spend time with them. So why would we cause something, such as lying, to come in between our relationship with the Father? See the difference in the answers? One is based on socially being accepted. Another could be on being right as the parent. And the third is pointing back to God. Let Him do the heavy lifting for our families, right? And to take a quote right out of our Intentional Families workbook, when we interact with each other in a God-honoring way, our homes are strengthened. Don't we want stronger families? I know I do, and I think you do if you are here. So teaching our children how to respond with respect whenever they have a question is our first action as parents. So our second take action is know your values. Know your family's values. We've talked about this at the beginning. Know them inside out. Know why you stand on them. Know why you live by them and why you expect everyone in your family to live by them as well, so that you can answer their questions. And the third action is just use language to highlight the importance of your values. Oh, the language we choose to use says so much about our family life. And our simple words can actually speak life into our family life, which is an amazing thing. On one hand, we can say, stop doing that, it's annoying. And on the other, we can say, make sure our actions are bringing grace into the space, which is something we often say. It's one of our little sayings, bring grace to the space. On the one hand, I'm just telling you what to do. I'm telling my child to stop, which at times it is absolutely okay to say things like this. But I'm talking about when we are trying to highlight our values. And in this case, I'm trying to bring them to think through what it is they're doing. Bring grace to the space. Oh, well, How am I not bringing grace to the space? Causing them to think through their actions will cause them to take ownership over their actions a little bit more. And remember back a few minutes when I said I was repeating myself again and again? This is why. Because I was just telling my children, don't do this, don't do that, stop this, stop that. Instead of causing them to stop and think, okay, how does this line up with our values? So on that note, let's review the 3 heavy liftings that we have to do as parents. Number 1, teach them how to ask the questions with respect, know your values inside out, and use language to highlight the importance of your values. So if I could lay out a challenge for you this week, it would be to think through your values and think about answering them when faced with the question, why do we do this? Why do we do that? What would your answer be? And if you haven't already, I would lay out another challenge. Give weight to some of your values. Choose a few, choose a couple, and start this week. And give weight from the heart of God to these values as you're talking through them with your children, with your family, in your everyday life, as you're moving in and out of things. Give weight to them. How? With the language you choose to use. And look for opportunities to use the language in your values. For example, if your child picked up their shoes, it's such a small thing, and yes, they have to pick up their shoes. Take that opportunity to say, thank you for serving the family and keeping your things picked up. Such a simple statement. We might not think it makes a big impact, but it does. Because what we are doing is taking a simple action of picking up your shoes and putting them away and saying, that was more than just keeping your things picked up. That was serving the family because you're keeping our common space clean. You're being conscious of keeping your things picked up. And thank you for that. Instead of highlighting their good work, we highlighted a value of our family. So think through the words that you choose to use. Give importance to them from God's perspective, not just our own, but use words like God calls us to, or this is the Father's heart. Show love for one another out of the abundance of the love of the Father, and say that. Serve each other like Jesus served when he was on this earth, and say that. Give a call to action that is greater than your word. Give a call to action that comes from God. I wish we could continue chatting, but I do have to go. But you guys, there is so much to unpack, so much to discuss, so much to dive into with God. But if you are wanting to discover a life full of grace and connections, or even jump in a little deeper on a life full of grace and connections, this Intentional Families Workbook is the tool for your family. Don't wait for the next podcast to come out before you jump into the rest of this chapter. Read it for yourself. Jump into it with your family today. You can download that on ellieandtheboys.co. And with that, dear mama, I am signing off. I need to go tuck my children into bed and kiss their little foreheads goodnight and finish off the day well with them. Thank you for joining me in today's conversation on the Live Out Loud podcast. Until next time.